When the doctors in San Francisco finished examining me, they had good news. The break in my arm was just an ordinary kind. The bone must have been weak, still recovering from being frozen, and the stress from pitching had opened a hairline crack. That's what caused the tingling. If I had remembered the doctor's warning, if I had stopped and taken myself out of the game, I could have been pitching again in the postseason. Even so, the future didn't look too bad. Nobody before me had pitched after losing his deltoid muscle. Plenty of people had pitched after breaking an arm. Dr. Campbell saw no reason why I couldn't return for the 1990 season. However, the weeks around the 1989 playoffs were extremely difficult for me. First off, I couldn't get a decent night's sleep. Because of my arm, I wasn't allowed to sleep lying down. Night after night, I tossed and turned. Day after day, I grew more tired. Also, Janice had to bathe me. I just don't like the feeling of helplessness, and I was frustrated that I couldn't play. I would go to the ballpark and try to be a good cheerleader, but soon I felt like an invisible man. I had never had to sit in the dugout and watch my team play for a championship. The first two games of the National League playoffs were in Chicago's Wrigley Field. In the first game, Will Clark clubbed two home runs and we won 11-3. Everybody was happy for me. That night I didn't sleep. I ate. It wasn't just my arm that ached either. It was my whole body aching to be in the game. If you only looked at the final scores of the 1989 National League Championship, you might think they were lacking in drama. In reality, they were tight, exciting games. We came to the fifth game leading 3-1. We were determined to win so we wouldn't have to go back to Wrigley Field. It was Mike Bielecki pitching for the Cubs against our Rick Rulisik. The Cubs had eaten Rick for breakfast in the second game of the series. But today he had them crossed up in every direction. And Mike Bielecki was locked in. None of us could figure out his pattern. We came to the bottom of the eighth inning tied at 1 run apiece. Bielecki had pitched almost flawlessly, giving up only 3 hits. One a triple to Will Clark that had allowed us to tie the game. With 2 outs, Roger Craig sent Candy Maldonada to hit for Ruluskel. I talked to Candy before the game. While everyone else was laughing and kidding around, he had been scrunched down in front of his locker, looking miserable. Roger wasn't starting him, and he hated to sit on the bench. Over the All-Star break, while he was home in Puerto Rico, Candy had committed himself to follow Christ. As long as I could remember, Candy had flirted with Christianity, but hadn't wanted to give up his lifestyle. Over the break, though, he, he'd finally come to a decision. For the first 2 weeks after that, he'd hit the ball all over the lot. He thought it was because he'd found God. Those of us who were Christians hadn't wanted to discourage him, but he'd warned we'd warned him that it didn't work that way. And sure enough, Candy slumped his worst year ever in the major leagues. Have to hand it to him though. He hung in there. He didn't quit the faith, and he didn't quit trying to play. When I saw him in the clubhouse, he looked at me with his big brown eyes full of pain and said, "Dave, I know how I'm supposed to act on the outside. I know I'm supposed to keep my feelings under control, but inside I'm hurting so bad. Inside I'm so..." He broke it off. couldn't talk. I was feeling some similar feelings. It was so hard not to play. Candy, I said, I know you can't just push it aside. I know it hurts, and that's the way it has to be. But keep your focus on the Lord, and when you get an opportunity, you'll be ready. When Candy was sent into pinch hit, I began to pray for him. By then, I was out in front of the bench, crouched down, screaming through every pitch. I told God, I know you don't want me to pray like this, but I'm going to anyway, because this guy has been in a pit and I want him to succeed. I prayed that Candy would hit a home run and be a hero. Although his at bat, I prayed for him. All through his at bat, I prayed for him. Candy didn't hit a home run. He did something more unusual. He showed patience. He kept fouling off pitches, working Bilitsky deeper into the count. Finally, he took a walk. A little thing. A walk with nobody on base, with 2 outs. Bilitsky took his game plan, lost his game plan. He said later he was tired, but you really should be able to throw strikes even when you're tired. Candy had pushed him to the limits and drawn a walk. And now, with 62,000 fans on their feet and their screams bouncing off the concrete bleachers, each strike became harder to find. He's a young pitcher, and I'm sure his heart was hammering. I know mine would have been. He walked Brett Butler. Then he walked Robbie Thompson, bases loaded. And that set the stage for Will Clark. There is nobody I would rather have at the plate when the crunch time comes, when the game is on the line. Will's round, dark, glittering eyes seem to stare through you. All he sees is the baseball. The Cubs manager, Don Zimmer, brought in Mitch Williams to pitch. It was the perfect matchup. Youth versus youth, lefty versus lefty, strength versus strength, our best versus their best. Williams' nickname is Wild Thing. I thought Mitch would walk home a run, but his first pitch was a strike. I knew then it was going to be a battle. Wild Thing was throwing heat. I also saw something in Will. He was staying in. Sometimes he, like all lefties, facing another lefty, tends to bail out. After all, the ball comes in like it's heading straight for your head. It's natural to duck, especially when with Mitch Williams throwing wild stuff that could literally kill you. But Will wasn't flinching. On the second pitch, a fastball. He swung, but fouled it weakly away. He took a ball, then fouled off a slider. He tipped a fastball high in the strike zone, just staying alive. He took a fastball away, evening the count at 2-2. Then Mitch threw a fastball high in the zone again, a pitch that Will often misses. And Will swung, locking his hips and connecting with that sweet, smooth swing, and the ball darted cleanly over second base and into center field. 2 runs came home, and the air of Candlestick was thick with sound. After we went ahead 3-1, I walked back to the clubhouse and put the brace on my arm. I wanted to celebrate, and I wanted to avoid hurting my arm while I did it. I couldn't believe it. My second World Series in 5 years. The game was not over, however. The Cubs began the top of the ninth, like batting practice, zinging hard line drives in every direction. A run came home, and the stands fell silent. There were 2 men on and 2 outs when Ryne Sandberg, Chicago's great second baseman, came to the plate. Sandberg is a pure fastball hitter. Steve Bedrosian was throwing nothing but fastballs and getting tagged. Terry Kennedy went out to talk to Steve. He told him to go with his slider since the fastball wasn't working. Bedrosian's slider hadn't been effective lately, but he threw one down and away. Sandberg swung and hit a soft ground ball to Robbie Thompson at second. Robbie wheeled and threw it to first. It was over. We were on our way to the World Series. Everybody rushed out of the dugout toward the mound, jumping on top of Bedrosian and Clark, piling together. I followed cautiously, wanting to be careful of my arm, but wanting to join the celebration. I never thought about being hit from behind. Someone, I have no idea who, slammed into me. I was thrown into the pile, and astounding pain blazed through my arm. It hurt as much as it had in Montreal. I went down into a crouch, holding the arm against my body, trying to protect it from the surging, leaping piles of bodies around me. Then Dusty Baker, our hitting coach, saw me and came to help. He and our trainer Mark pulled me out and led me off the field, holding my arm in pain while the rest of the team continued to celebrate.